So during the course of the Clone Wars, the armor worn by clone troopers changed quite a bit. But the most notable change was going from Phase 1 to Phase 2 clone armor. Today we'll talk about some of the differences between Phase 1 and Phase 2 armor, as well as some of the changes that clone armor went through during the war. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So as many of us know, clone trooper armor went through some pretty dramatic changes during the course of the Clone Wars. During this relatively short period of time, the clone trooper armor was able to be pretty much upgraded in its entirety, from what we know as Phase 1 armor to Phase 2 armor. All of this stems from the Kaminoans still kind of figuring out how to build a proper set of armor for human soldiers, but it still makes a very interesting visual evolution in between the clones we see in Attack of the Clones and the clones we see in Revenge of the Sith. So let's just jump right into it and talk about the differences between Phase 1 and Phase 2. So, Phase 1 armor was actually not really liked very much by the troops. Clone troopers often complained about the Phase 1 armor not being very ergonomic. So the Kaminoans almost immediately set to work redesigning the armor and building something new. Well, the Phase 1 armor was a really good set of armor, including things like an internal respiration system allowing clone troopers to breathe in space, and a built-in communication system that allowed them to effectively communicate over long distances. Phase 1 was still not really preferred by the troops and often limited their mobility in combat, which put them at serious risk. So, Phase 2 was under development pretty quickly after the start of the war. So, as one would imagine, the biggest difference in between Phase 1 and Phase 2 is the ergonomics. Many clone troopers claim that Phase 2 armor was more comfortable. Its more form-fitting design is sleeker and fits to the body a little bit better, which ultimately makes it easier to fight a war wearing this armor. But on top of that, interestingly enough, the Phase 2 armor was designed from the ground up to be more modular. While the Phase 1 armor was relatively rigid and didn't accommodate a lot of modification, the Phase 2 armor was designed to be able to take a lot of different specialized equipment. For example, it could carry a wide variety of different backpacks mounted to it, allowing the troopers wearing this armor to carry out a variety of different roles. On top of that, it could be modified easily for cold weather environments. It could easily be modified for use for things like jump troopers and other very specialized units that really would normally have an entirely different armor set. And one last notable advantage is that the Phase 2 armor is reportedly easier to see through. Its larger eye holes made it easier for clone troopers to survey the battlefield and increase their spatial awareness. Like most of the other improvements, this allowed them to be more effective in combat. However, there were some things that did have to get cut from the Phase 2 armor that were in the Phase 1. The life support system which was present in the Phase 1 armor was cut in the Phase 2, which is why during the later years of the war, when clone troopers are operating in space, we see them use that apparatus with the hoses. That basically is an external life support system to replace the internal one that had to be removed. The other system that was notably scaled back for the Phase 2 armor is the communication system. Well, the Phase 1 had a massive antenna on top of it, allowing the troopers to communicate over vast distances. The Phase 2 armor cut that antenna back significantly, limiting troopers to only short-range communications. And the Phase 2 armor, as we see, carries on past the end of the Republic. With the end of the war, during the very early days of the Empire, the Phase 2 armor is still utilized by stormtroopers, which used to be clone troopers. Which makes sense, by the way. Developing an entire new set of armor does take time, and implementing it takes even more time. So it does make sense that the older sets of armor would remain in use. However, like a lot of things utilized by the clone army, the Empire was pretty eager to sort of move them out of standard use. They wanted to remove any remnants of the old Republic and send the message that the Empire really is a totally different entity. And a key part of that is removing the iconic armor from their soldiers. So it wasn't long into the reign of the Empire that the Phase 2 armor was replaced with the Stormtrooper armor which we see in the original trilogy. Now it is notable that a few Imperial units did continue using Phase 2 armor all the way up into the Galactic Civil War. A great example of this are the Imperial Shock Troopers of the Coruscant Guard. So the Phase 2 had some very significant advantages over the Phase 1 and did technically have a longer lifespan with its use under the Empire. But there's one big disadvantage that I think is worth noting about the Phase 2 armor, and that's that it is significantly more expensive than the Phase 1. With a single set of Phase 1 armor costing 2,000 credits, it's a significant jump for the Phase 2 to cost 3,000 credits. But this armor was originally designed for the Clone Wars, the vicious war between the CIS and the Galactic Republic. If you want to learn more about the Clone Wars, the war that spawned both these sets of armor, I have an entire playlist on that, and I'll leave a link up here to it. And I want you to let me know down in the comments which set of armor you prefer. Do you like the Phase 1 better or the Phase 2? And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time!